In today's episode, we're going to be discussing setting and holding to reasonable expectations in 2023. And the self-help tip will be setting boundaries for yourselves.
Thank you for joining us on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse, where we talk about strategies, tips, and tricks on navigating and recovering from narcissistic abuse. I'm your host, Dr. Kerry McAvoy, a mental health clinician with over 20 years experience and author of Love You More, a graphic inside look at my experience of a toxic relationship.
And I'm your other co-host, Tara Blair-Ball, a certified relationship coach, an abuse survivor, and author of Reclaim and Recover, Heal from Toxic Relationships with a 7-step guided journal.
We're thrilled that you're here with us today. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and leave us a review and let us know what you think of the show. You can find me at Instagram at Kerry McAvoy, PhD.
And I'm at Tara.relationshipcoach.
So I've been thinking a lot about reasonable expectations in 2023 and how we set them, what can go wrong, what can mess it up for us as we're going through in our journey. Resolutions are these things where you just, usually we give them up by February, but then we feel like we failed and we're like guilting and shaming ourselves for that in the process. For myself, I've been thinking a lot about our goals and plans for the year. I have a lot of things on the docket that I'm nervous about that are new and exciting. And I find that I struggle the most just with perfectionism and being okay with still making mistakes, even though I've been told by multiple therapists that new mistakes are a sign of progress. And that was something I really struggled with when I got out of my really abusive relationship, is when I would face a mistake. It would still be a mistake, and I would still just shame and get mad at myself. Like when I was dating, and then I chose a partner that was a little too similar to my ex. And then I was like, well, why did I date him? Why did I choose him? What's wrong with me? What have I not healed? And that kind of thing. But also recognizing that I didn't then stay with that person for nearly 10 years and have children with them and marry them and buy houses with them. I just dated them for a couple of weeks and then left the relationship. It was still a mistake, but it was a different kind of mistake. And I didn't stay in it for as long. And new mistakes are always a sign of progress. And that's something I really have to remember for myself, is that I'm human. I'm still going to make mistakes, but at least they're not the same old, the insanity of what it was like for me being in an abusive relationship, doing the same thing over and over again, somehow expecting a different result. But for myself, I really like what we talked about in our last episode about reintegrate, because I tend at this point in my life to really shame myself for not being, I guess not speaking up for myself more in my romantic relationship. There's been definitely some shifts. My husband his job has really gotten more intense. We had to pull my daughter out of daycare because it wasn't a good fit for her. And I really put a pause on my own career because I saw these other people's needs as more important than my own. And that was the whole reason why I got in it and stayed in a very abusive situation, is because I prioritized someone else's needs, desires, happiness, wants over mine, and really neglected myself in the process. And I can see myself doing that again. And I've really had to reshift and start speaking up again, because I can't go back to what was normal for me in the past, even though that's just sort of how my blueprint is of this is what I need to do. I do have to sort of shift back. And part of doing this podcast this year is about taking that shift and power back of my career matters just as much as my husband's. And why is that something I tell myself? Why is that the narrative that I have? Oh, it's because that's what it was like in my parents' relationship. That's what it was like in my relationship with my parents, that, someone else's needs always have to come before your own, and your needs just don't matter. Yeah. So that's been me.
Yeah, that's been interesting. I resonated with so much. One is I often set goals that I maybe are way out, some things that I have not, for example, the common one for most of us is to lose weight this year. But what we're not taking into account, that we don't have a decent exercise plan. We don't make time for any of that.
We don't even drink enough water, and then we don't know how much we're actually eating, and whether or not we could actually like facilitate a different kind of like meal plan with the way our family's eating and can afford it. I mean, there's all these parts and pieces that causes a collapse. This year I've been really thinking about goals too. It's but differently. I've not set any resolutions, although I did set some maybe professionals goals, but it is interesting sort of seeing how failure is such a loaded topic. And
Mm.
one of the things I've noticed, and I'd love to know if you saw the same thing, is that, and I kind of heard it in your story, is that failing has been attached with such shame that we don't realize that failing, like you said, is part of success. It's part of learning a new thing. You can't tell a child learn to walk and then not expect them to fall. Of course they're going to fall. That's part of learning to walk. But when you're in an abusive situation, there's no room for that. That puts you in such a dangerous position to fail, that you sort of then put this on you of, I got to be perfect because I can't have the backlash. If it goes wrong, this is going to be catastrophic and I'll be really, really unsafe. The good news for me was, I grew up in a home that was kind of just checked out and neglectful. So as long as I wasn't around them, then there wasn't a whole lot of comment on what I was doing. So I could do things new that were on my own and were not observed. But when I was in that 2-year marriage, everything that I did, I was with him 24/7, literally all the time. Everything I did was under constant observation, and he had to have an opinion on every single thing that I did. So it made everything I challenged myself to try scary, because there's so much risk riding on it that you're right. It's really hard. In fact, I think this year is one of the first years I actually tried to set goals. This is the 3rd year out, and it's taken that long for me to start to heal, for me to feel comfortable enough saying, yeah, I can risk failing, because failing is going to be part of the success. That's how we get there. But yeah, isn't it? I mean, I'm even hearing myself say how we've split it from failing and success without realizing that failure is part of success.
Yeah. So, I don't know if I was very fearful of failure because I could have a degree of control over the failure,
Mm,
because I could self-sabotage, I could check out before, when I look back at how I was raised in my previous marriage, there was a lot of self-sabotage because at least I had some control over that outcome. If I was actually successful and it failed, then I wouldn't have any control over that outcome. And I mean, I grew up in a family and had a romantic relationship where nothing I did was ever good enough. So at least I couldn't lose out on something that was really amazing, like being successful. So I just had a lot of self-sabotage growing up, and yeah,
say
in that marriage.
say more about if it goes well, if it fails and you succeeded, what how does that play out?
So let's say I sold a book. Okay. So let's say I sell a book, but it doesn't sell very well. Okay. That means I've done the thing, but then it failed because of something outside of my control. So
Oh,
that is way worse than I just never submit the book to be published. You know what I mean? Like I stay stuck in that, oh, it would happen if I did something, but then I just never do it. So for me, that self-sabotage was a big deal, just being fearful of success and what that might mean for me. Because honestly, also being successful would really talk against or counter the negative things that my family, my ex-husband would tell me. They're like, "You'll never do well, you'll blah blah blah." And also the negative things I would tell myself. Success would completely counter that. And I was uncomfortable with that idea of I really just wanted to go along with that negative frame of mind and that negative thinking because I felt comfortable.
yeah, Dr. Ramadi, I got to hear her in continuing education last year for clinicians, and she said that every abuse victim has permanent imposter syndrome.
Oh.
I know, and when you said that, that's exactly what I would do. I would need to know that whatever I did was possible and that I would succeed at it, because otherwise I wouldn't do it. I knew I could get a PhD. I knew I had it in me. I knew that I'd done well in school and I had all that. history. I knew how to show up and do the work. I knew how to please the teachers. I mean, I knew all of that and I had confidence in myself. But yet, I'll tell you, publishing a book was scary as hell because I couldn't make the public buy it.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is. You're right. It is really hard doing the things when you can't guarantee the outcome. And those are the ones that I tend to, up to recently, avoid because it was too scary. Way, way too scary.
So are we, if we're going to have imposter syndrome forever? No,
Do you feel it? Do you agree? Is that what you struggle with too?
I really do. I work against it. And I think that's the power of taking those steps that you get that positive experience that you can keep building on to basically have some faith that, oh, if I try this, and it doesn't work out, I'll be okay. I'll just keep trying. Like you said, that failure is a part of success. And what I think her name is Susan Duckworth, who wrote about grit. That's what I never had any grit. I didn't at all. I would give up at the first sign of struggle because again, I wanted to do what was easy, what would lead to whatever I thought. But developing that grit comes with being okay with failure and continuing to move on regardless and being persistent with that. And that's anybody who's been as an abuse survivor has grit. That resilience is such a natural, inherent part of grit to be able to overcome something that plenty of people tell you that you can't overcome. Your abusive partner will tell you no one will ever love you as much as I did, which my ex-husband told me that plenty. No one will ever love you as much as I did. No one will ever do X, Y, Z for you like I did. You know what? They did. My current husband is absolutely wonderful. He loves me way more than my ex-husband did and does so much for me, And if I had stayed in that line of thinking, I would have stayed in that relationship because this is the best I'll get.
Yeah, one of the things that touched me deeply, I mean, I think for me, it was one of these life-changing quotes, was that interview, and I know I'm not gonna be able to quote it perfectly, but that interview that Thomas Edison had about the light bulb, and the journalist said to him, "So you failed," I think he did something like 1,000 times, "So you failed 1,000 times?" He said, "No, I just found 1,000 different ways a light bulb doesn't work." And then it worked. But I love that. It was just 1,000 different directions it didn't work, and then one worked. And I got to hear there was a clip on TikTok of one of the Shark Tank people. I think that's where she's at. She was talking about why she doesn't invest in rich kids' plans. Did you know she had a policy against that? She typically will
I
not.
didn't.
Yeah, she won't invest in rich kids' plans. And she said, I want a poor person or somebody who's raised themselves up because they've got grit. She said, it isn't about wanting to make money that makes people successful. It's about having a passion. And people who have come up out of something painful is usually passionate about that topic, and they're the ones that are going to succeed.
It sounds harsh. I don't invest in rich kids, which isn't really true, but almost true. Because rich kids on Shark Tank come with a couple of attributes that disturb me. Rich kids come in with a couple of disadvantages, I feel, okay? They've had the right jobs because they had the right contacts. So they had the right apprenticeships in right companies in their summer months when they're teenagers. They get the right introductions, okay? Poor kids are usually waiting tables and scrapping, dealing with customers, spilling coffee, and getting shouted at. A little different, okay? Rich kids, when starting businesses on Shark Tank, the ones I see on Shark Tank, typically have gone to the finest schools. And what comes with going to the finest schools, especially business schools, what comes is a certain attitude that they know it. That's a dangerous attribute to have in anything when you're starting out in anything. Okay? But what they do know is they know all about business as an observer, but they don't know business as a player. Whereas poor kids tend to have had hardship. They've had to be a player earlier. They've had to contribute to the family. They've seen their parents struggle. They know the power of a buck.
And I've been thinking about both of our platforms, about the fact that we came out of something and said, damn it, I'm not doing it again. And I don't want to see anyone else doing it again either. And that's been my motto has been, I'm not crushed. I'm not going to let him crush me. Hell no, he does not get to have the last answer on this. I'm going to come back and make lemonade out of the lemons. And yeah, so So when it comes to this year with 2023, what are some of your plans then in light of all of that?
Yeah. So my husband, we got my daughter into daycare, so that's been a shift, and she's adjusting. My husband and I have consistently had to work on division of labor issues, which I find in my relationship, it really comes down to me. It really comes down to my codependency gets triggered, and I start doing tasks that aren't mine, and then getting resentful or bitter because that task is not being that I'm completing that task and he's not, but I'm just doing it and expecting him to read my mind and things like that. We're also being more intentional. We do a weekly relationship check-in, which we sort of slipped at different times of the year, but we're back on that, which is really helpful. Because it really just gives the place to, at least for me, when I can struggle just voicing for myself, which seems so silly because that's what I encourage clients to do all the time. But I don't, sometimes we don't always follow our advice, or we're giving that advice because we need to hear it. And that's what I've needed to hear, is just being able to speak up for myself and be more assertive. And sometimes I just need that space that's dedicated to do that. And the weekly relationship check-in gives me that space. There's a specific part in the format that's like something that's been bothering you, something you'd like to revisit. And division of labor is an ongoing thing in this relationship. It's also a place where I can be triggered a lot because my ex-husband, for example, would shame me for how I did household duties, to the point that I was paralyzed by inaction, because I felt like, oh, if I do XYZ and then he criticizes me, what's the point of even doing it? And I can still find it's again that resonance that I'm still having to work through and build on, because I was in that relationship for nearly 10 years and mirrored the relationship I had with my mother from birth, and it still has that resonance. I wish it was gone, and it's getting lesser, but it's just taking some time. So for me, it's about speaking up and taking some space for myself more, which I've done in the past. I don't really know what triggered. I honestly think what triggered it for me was me needing to take care of my daughter, and getting into that sexist line of thinking that, like, oh, it needs to be the woman and you have to take care of your home all by yourself. And, I don't know what it was. But it sucked, and I'm not doing it again.
I can offer a little theory, because this is one thing that I've heard and seen. Is that often when we get involved with somebody that reminds us of ourselves, we get pulled into wanting to heal that part of ourselves, which may activate old patterns for us. Just a thought. But because you to me are so strong and very disciplined and have a lot of structure. So I find that kind of intriguing, because that's not my experience of you. It's not my assumption.
Mhm.
But then I don't live with you to know what
But
my
I'm such a good imposter because of my abuse survivor.
yeah.
Oh.
Hey, it's the opposite. It's interesting because I'm in the opposite place. I'm an overdoer and really driven, and I put myself almost on a treadmill where I I I I pressure myself to the point that sometimes my chest is tight and I can't hardly breathe. Yet I work for myself. I mean, I'm not working for anyone
Right.
else. And all my deadlines are my own. They're nobody, I set them with other people. So I've discovered that I've become a taskmaster, and become abusive to myself in the form of neglect. So this year my goal is to back up and lighten up a little bit and set more realistic goals. And interestingly enough, today is, I know that when people hear this, it won't be the 4th of January, but right, we're taping it on the 4th, and I've already failed 3 days in a row.
I'm so proud of you.
No, I've failed 3 days in a row.
I'm proud of you.
Oh, yeah, so today I'm
Fail a
interviewing.
little bit.
Yeah, I know, but you're right, because I have to look at it like, "Okay, so now I know that didn't work, and I know this doesn't work," and so, yeah, I'm not stopping. This is one of these things that if I don't master this, I mean, it's gonna have health repercussions, and now I'm at the age where that can be very, very serious and show right up right away. So it's imperative for me to get on top of that this year and to approach it differently. So my kinda to summarize it, I wanna be kinder. I wanna be kinder and nicer to me. That's my big goal for this year.
Institute a nap every day, Carrie. Let's just do a nap every day in 2023. There's this book by Gretchen Rubin that I really like called The Four Tendencies, where it talks about the 4 ways that people uphold and stick to habits. And I actually find it really helpful in assessing how you approach things like goals or resolutions. So the 4 different ones, there's upholders, questioners, rebels, obligers. So upholders do really well at sticking to inner and outer expectations. So an outer expectation might be a deadline at work, meeting a friend to do a fitness class. An inner expectation might be that you want to go to a fitness class or lose weight, or you want to stick to a deadline. An obliger does really well sticking to outer expectations, but really poorly at sticking to inner expectations. A rebel really have difficulty sticking to inner and outer expectations because they're going to rebel against it. And the last one is questioner. They're only willing to stick to inner and outer expectations if there seems like a good reason for them to do something. An upholder, which I'm not sure if I mentioned, they're good at sticking to either one. So she has a little quiz that you can take for it, but when I figured it out for myself, I'm a rebel. So that means I do piss poor at doing inner and outer expectations goals unless I reframe it to somehow being unique or special. So if I set a goal like lose weight, I'm going to gain 50 pounds because I'm like, I'm going to gain the weight, right? But if I frame it like I'm healthy and I drink green smoothies and no one else drinks green smoothies. If I frame it like it's unique and special, green smoothies aren't very unique, but whatever, it's an example. If I frame it like that, I'm more likely to stick to it. And that's helpful for me and figuring it out. So of those 4, which one do you think you might be?
Oh, I'm a holder, obviously.
You're an upholder?
Yeah, I will die on a point. You said that I trust it.
So that's good that you do stick to those goals or deadlines. And then it comes down to like what you said, like, how do we make them reasonable? How do we give ourselves some grace and fluff in there? As a rebel, I can give myself too much grace and fluff. And so I think that's much funny that we ended up pairing with that.
Exactly. Yeah, like I sent you to my do list and I thought she didn't get to it yet today. Interesting. I would have already sent it back by now. So I thought, no worries. I know this is important to her. She'll get to it. Just chill, Kerry, chill. But yeah, no, I'm kind of like anxious. Can't stand things not being done. I'm going to do it right away. And because now I'm starting to forget, which makes it even harder. I don't like that part of getting older, is starting to forget things. But yeah, no, I struggle with that.
Being a mama. Oh, I got that just being a mom.
Yeah, exactly. So anything that we want to say is kind of like a takeaway for people when they're thinking of this year being January and we're heading into the new year. And for me, it's look at the pattern you've had in the past and what worked and what hasn't worked. And remember to be realistic, set smaller goals, realistic goals, and ones that when you think about your whole life, that they're feasible, and make sure that you take yourself into account, whether or not just because it's going to be good for you, maybe culturally or having people around you happier, but is it really good for you? Like even losing weight, yeah, we can always lose weight, but you want a lifestyle that also leaves room for you to be you and to learn to accept ourselves as where we're at. There's nothing really inherently good or bad about a number on a scale. It's where we're at with ourselves. So to me, it's like, be realistic and be kind.
Mhm. I think it's also helpful to think about in terms of what I mentioned with Gretchen Rubin, the 4 tendencies is how would you, once you figure out those realistic goals, and to be fair, I really struggled setting realistic goals for the longest time. I would either set goals that were just too easy to achieve, or they would be like, I would need decades to achieve that goal. So, if you need to work on figuring out the really realistic goals, I would suggest maybe start small, and figure out from there as you go along. But also figuring out how would you best achieve that goal? Do you need, if you're wanting to lose weight or just get healthier, like, would you do best if a friend, did it with you? Like you met for a workout class twice a week, or would you do better if you scheduled the time yourself, or if you really got down into research of why it would be best for you? Like if you're a questioner, I think it's incredibly helpful just to learn more about ourselves and apply it to our own lives in these ways that seem really actionable and practical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I even got thinking about like those who want to take on keto. Well, maybe your family doesn't. So that means you're going to buy a whole set of groceries separate and you're going to have a whole separate meal. I mean, those are the things I think we forget about when we move into these is how can we integrate it into our lifestyle, with our other relationships. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great plan. So next week we're going to be talking about um we're going to make a big shift in topics, and that is why is it so popular to identify everybody as narcissists? And is our narcissist the only one who are actually narcissistically abusive? So this is going to be an interesting place to get into next week. I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
In today's self-help tip, we're going to talk about the importance of learning how to set boundaries for yourself. One thing I learned while I was in a toxic/abusive relationship is I thought boundaries were sort of things that I stated that the other person needed to follow through on, but I wouldn't necessarily hold myself accountable to the same boundaries. For example, at a time in our relationship, we were not going to yell while we fought. And he would yell, and I would use that as blame for the reason why I then yelled. Unfortunately, that's not quite how self boundaries work. For example, if I want to choose how to fight differently, I do have power and control over whether I choose to yell or not. So I started putting timeouts up for myself. If I knew I was about to yell or if I'd already begun yelling, I would physically walk out of wherever I was, whether it was leaving the room, leaving the house, whatever it might be, but taking myself physically away from the situation allowed me to learn how to start to enforce that boundary with myself. So a helpful tip is to really look at the boundaries that you're placing on others and seeing how well you can work on enforcing that boundary with yourself.
This is awesome because it's so often we wait for the other person to change before we make a change. And then when that never happens, then there's no change. Things just stay the same. So I love how you're suggesting we start with ourselves first. It's so helpful. So what boundaries are all of you working on for yourself for this year that you want a little bit different? Maybe that a new person or a new way of handling something. I'd love to hear back from you on how this is going and what your goals are.
What did you think of today's episode? And are you planning on trying the self-help tip? Either way, let us know by dropping us a comment or sending us an email. Are you following us on social media? We'd love to connect with you there. And we'll see you back here next Monday.